So, in this second ever episode of Ancient Generals, Who's Who, I'm going to be talking about another ancient Greek general, but this one, he emerged really in the immediate aftermath of Alexander the Great's death. Now, he wasn't one of the main big successor players that you'll probably be hearing about in a future video, I can guarantee. His name was, well, he was an Athenian, and his name was Leosthenes. So what do we know about Leosthenes? Well, about his early life, not much. So this can be a pretty quick section, if I'm honest. Leosthenes' dad, who was also called Leosthenes, he was exiled from Athens in about the mid-4th century BC. And because of this, Leosthenes' dad, he went to Macedonia. He went to the kingdom of Macedonia when it was ruled by King Philip II, the famous father of Alexander the Great. And he remained there, it seems, for the rest of his life. But while he was there, obviously he had a family and he had a son, and his son was also called Leosthenes, the Leosthenes we're talking about now. And after that, I said we don't know much else about his early life, but what we do know about Leosthenes is mainly entirely military based, because Leosthenes fought in the famous Persian campaign of Alexander the Great. Now, we don't know exactly for which side Leosthenes fought for during Alexander the Great's Persian campaign. Did he fight with Alexander the Great as one of the many Greek hoplite mercenaries from the city-states further south, city-states such as Athens, Corinth, Argos, etc.? Or was he one of the many thousands of Greek mercenaries who served King Darius III as his elite heavy infantry and who were also disillusioned with Alexander the Great's rule over their home city-states? Was Leosthenes fighting for Persian gold? Or was he fighting in the service of Alexander the Great? We do not know. What we do know, however, is that he would have fought in at least one of Alexander the Great's major victories against King Darius III of Persia. And most likely of the three, well, the two, if we consider the ones where Darius himself actually fought, most likely he fought at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, November the 5th, 33 BC. But when Leosthenes' life really gets interesting is what we hear is during Alexander the Great's Persian campaigns, whether it was at the start or whether it was halfway through, if Leosthenes was originally serving with Alexander the Great, Leosthenes develops this hardened hatred of Alexander the Great. He develops this deep, passionate unlikingness of Alexander. I don't know if unlikingness is a word, but I've just made it up. And this hatred of Alexander continued for the rest of his life. Because according to one of our sources, I believe it's Diodorus, not long afterwards, when Alexander the Great, he's conquered the Persian Empire, as it were, and the Greek mercenaries in the Persian army have surrendered to Alexander the Great. Alexander wished to punish them by sending them to the frontiers of his empire and basically to be expendable border guards. However, Leosthenes, apparently, he manages to take these Greek mercenaries home back to Greece before Alexander could carry through this order. This, to be honest though, seems like a later fictional tale which was added to Leosthenes' story at a later date. What concrete evidence we do know after Leosthenes' fighting in the Persian campaign was that he is back in Europe by 324 BC. And this is when he really starts to make his name, because 324 BC is a very big year for Athens and the Greek city-states, especially for Athens. Now, first of all, back in Asia, Alexander the Great has just returned from his Indian campaign, and he has returned to see that many of his governors have basically not treated their governorships well. They've started raising their own private armies and embezzled a lot of money for their own luxurious use. They become very luxurious, very decadent. And so one of the key signs of this was their raising of their own private mercenary armies. Now, many of these mercenary armies consisted of a significant portion of mercenary Greek hoplites. You know, the iconic warriors holding their round, large aspis shields with the symbol of their home city on. They also have their 2-meter long dory spear. They can form the hoplite phalanx with it in these tight formations. They were reliable mercenaries to hire, and that's why there were so many were hired by Alexander's governors. However, when Alexander gets back, he demands that these private armies are not eradicated, they are disbanded. And so in the click of a finger, well, over 324 BC, many thousands of Greek mercenaries dotted around Alexander the Great's empire in Asia find themselves unemployed. But fortunately for them, there is a place they can go. And this place is called Tainarum. Now, Tainarum is at the southernmost part of the Peloponnese. And it was here that in the immediate years prior to 324 BC, a mercenary camp, like a haven for unemployed mercenaries, had emerged. And the commanders of these various Greek mercenary contingents around Asia, they hear word of Tainarum, of this safe haven with which they and their soldiers can travel to, and they start making their way to Tainarum in great numbers. Now, according to another tale in our sources, apparently it's Leosthenes who lets these abandoned Greek mercenaries, these stranded Greek mercenaries in Asia, know of this haven in Greece. However, once again, this also seems a bit fictitious, and a later story added to Leosthenes' biography at a later date to kind of even improve his figure even more as this Athenian hero. I said, logistically, this idea that he was able to get agents to spread word to all these stranded contingents seems unlikely and very difficult to achieve. But what we do know is that by 323 BC, Tainarum has expanded to about 8,000 professional mercenary soldiers looking for employment. And this was what Leosthenes was sure to take advantage of, because he goes to Tainarum and he is soon elected their leader. He shows his charisma as a general, his ability to lead, and they elect him the leader of the mercenaries situated then at Tainarum. Now, Athens at this time is on the brink of revolt from the Macedonians. An unpopular last couple of years under the Macedonian yoke, especially epitomized by a decree called the Exiles Decree in 324 BC, where Alexander had demanded the Athenians give back the city of Samos to its native inhabitants. The Athenians are being riled for a revolt against Alexander the Great and the Macedonians, particularly by a very charismatic statesman called Hypereides. Now, one of the ways Hypereides wants to make sure Athens is ready for a war against the superpower of the time. And so he gathers the funds and he secretly starts talking to Leosthenes in Tainarum. And he starts funding Leosthenes to start secretly and very covertly recruiting mercenaries for the Athenian cause when Athens does decide to declare war. Now, when Athens decided to declare war was in 323 BC, in the immediate aftermath, when as soon as Athens heard of Alexander the Great's death. Now, when concrete news of Alexander the Great's death filters into Athens, Hypereides and the Athenian assembly vote on war. Leosthenes emerges as this charismatic general in the Athenian assembly, the man to lead their armies to glory, and he also brings with him 8,000 mercenary Greek hoplites, these veteran soldiers, probably one of the most formidable forces on the Greek mainland at that time. Leosthenes, he parades them through the city streets, gleaming in their brazen armour with their dory spears, their large aspis shields, their discipline, their cohesion, and it must have been an awe-inspiring sight for all who cast eyes upon it. I mean, even Phocion, one of the Athenian statesmen who was less inclined to war with the Macedonians, he even admitted that it was a fine sight to see. And with this army, Leosthenes, the Athenians have declared war, and they know that the Macedonians will be coming for them sooner rather than later. And particularly the viceroy of Macedonia at that time, who was a man called Antipater. So Leosthenes, he starts going around the Greek mainland seeking allies in this war of liberation from the Macedonians. And he gets success from regions such as Phocis, not too far by the Phocians. They decide to join him. You also get a city in Euboea, the city of Charistus, and also a few cities in the Peloponnese, such as Sicyon. But most importantly, he got the aid of the Aetolians. Now, the Aetolians gave Leosthenes, provided for this Greek confederacy, as it were, 7,000 soldiers. And the Aetolians and Leosthenes' mercenary force, they head up towards the place where they've selected to be where they will make their stand against Antipater's army, which was soon to be upon them. And the place they decide to make their stand was none other than the most iconic defensive position in the whole of Greece, none other than Thermopylae. And it is there that Leosthenes starts setting up defences for the battle which would come imminently. However, at that time he hears of a new threat, because the Boeotians, the neighbours of the Athenians, they stayed loyal to the Macedonians and they raised their own force, but to attack the Athenians, not to join them. And what really gives this dilemma is because Boeotia is situated in between Thermopylae and Athens. And so any reinforcing army coming through Athens has to really go through Boeotia to reach Leosthenes at Thermopylae. And this, at the time, was true for the Athenian citizen army, about 5,500 men, which had just finished preparations and was about to start marching from Athens to Thermopylae. But they had this Boeotian army, probably about a similar size as well, backed up by some veteran Macedonians as well, standing in their way. Now Leosthenes, he can't take the risk, because if he does nothing and if he stays at Thermopylae, the Athenians could easily be beaten by the Boeotians before they even reach the front line of fighting, before they even reach Thermopylae. But Leosthenes, he's wary about leaving Thermopylae too underdefended if Antipater comes in the meantime. But Leosthenes, he's a bold, young, charismatic general, and he uses one of the lessons he probably learnt during his time either with or against Alexander the Great. Because with his mercenary hoplites, he marches down, he makes a lightning march down from Thermopylae, he goes down into Boeotia, he circumnavigates the Boeotian army near Plataea, and he unites with the Athenian citizen army. Now with Leosthenes' mercenaries and the Athenian citizens combined, they crush the Boeotian force in the field, and they successfully make it back to Thermopylae before Antipater's army arrives. So at the moment you've got Leosthenes and his large army, probably consisting now at about 21,000 men, awaiting the arrival of Antipater, who had a smaller army, but his infantry, the Macedonian infantry, were the best and most feared in the world. During his march south, Antipater was hoping to enlist the aid of the Thessalian cavalry, one of the most formidable cavalry forces in Greece, and a lot of them swelled to join the Macedonian ranks at first. Because not long after, when Antipater's army was closing in on Thermopylae, the Thessalians deserted Antipater's cause and they rode over to join the Athenian confederacy at Thermopylae. Leosthenes now realizes his army far outnumbers Antipater's, and he also has supremacy in cavalry. And so he decides to abandon all the defensive positions he's been making and to sally out and to fight Antipater on the open field. The location of this battlefield was just north of Thermopylae, to the west of the Malian Gulf, on the plain of Trachis, near the city of Heraclea. I'm sure there'll be a map here to show you where the most likely battle site was. And in the ensuing battle, Leosthenes won the day. Antipater was forced to retreat to a city further north across the Spercheius River, a city called Lamia, but a well-fortified city. And Leosthenes, he celebrates his victory and then he hurries off in pursuit. Now, at this time, with Antipater now holed up in the city of Lamia and badly beaten from the past defeat, from his recent defeat, Leosthenes is now the most powerful man on the Greek mainland. And he may even have been the most powerful man in Europe at that time. Now Leosthenes, when he gets to Lamia, he decides he wants to take the city as soon as possible. His aim for this war is to restore lost liberty to Athens, to free them from the yoke of Macedonian hegemony. And so he wants to defeat Antipater in a decisive battle as soon as possible. He wants to become, really, to be honest, the next Athenian hero of antiquity, the next Miltiades, or the next Themistocles, or the next Aristides. And so he said he attacks straight away, but Antipater's Macedonians and the defensive strength of Lamia ensures that his attacks are beaten back. And Leosthenes has no choice but to settle down for a longer siege of the city. This is where things start getting a bit troubling for Leosthenes, because not soon after, the Aetolian contingent, about 7,000 strong, they desert Leosthenes' army because they have to return home to deal with some national business. Most likely this was a war between the Aetolians and their troublesome neighbours to the northwest, the Acarnanians. But Leosthenes, in the blink of an eye, he's lost 7,500 of his fighters. But nevertheless, he continues the siege, and Antipater's forces soon enough they start to wither inside Lamia. And so much so that Antipater, he sent an envoy to Leosthenes asking for a negotiated surrender, for a negotiated peace. Leosthenes, however, in his aim to gain a decisive victory to become the next Miltiades, he refuses. All he wants is an unconditional surrender, and so much so that he replied to the envoy, "The victors will set the terms." Leosthenes demanded an unconditional surrender and nothing else, and this was something that Antipater would not agree to, or at least he would not agree to at that time. So Leosthenes and the rest of his army, they settled down for a siege across the winter of 323 to 322 BC, and they start erecting a wall around Lamia and a defensive moat out of range of the artillery shots, but still being able to surround the city to blockade supplies. And this starts to take its toll on Antipater and the Macedonians. However, Antipater and the Macedonians were not going to do nothing in the meantime, and they made regular sallies outside from Lamia to attack the defensive fortifications as Leosthenes' engineers were building them. And one such sally occurred in late 323 BC, when a small Macedonian party attacked a part of the wall where Leosthenes' engineers were busy at work. At the start, the Macedonians were getting the upper hand in this sally. They were beating back the engineers, and soon Leosthenes hears about this skirmish and the fate of his troops at that moment in time. So he gathers his companions around him and he hurries over to that part of the battlefield, to that part of the siege works, to aid his comrades against this Macedonian attack. Yet to get there as fast as possible, Leosthenes and his comrades, they go in front of their siege lines and they go into the ancient equivalent of no man's land, this area of land between the walls of Lamia and the besiegers' siege works, where the Macedonian artillerists have the range to fire down on their enemy. And so just imagine the scene. Leosthenes and his small band, they are marching, they are hurrying over to where they see the action at this point of the siege works in the distance. And at the same time, on the walls of Lamia in the distance, at the other part, by the city, you have the Macedonian artillerists on the walls. They see this small band of enemies in the distance, and they decide to try for a lucky catapult shot. Back then, of course, they wouldn't have been very accurate, but all they needed was one lucky shot, and they got it. As Leosthenes was hurrying towards the action, he was hit by a stone, a catapulted stone, and he fell to the floor. His comrades managed to take him back to the camp, but he did not survive for much longer. 3 days later, I believe it was about 3 days later, Leosthenes breathed his last. And that was the end of Leosthenes. He had hoped to become one of Athens' greatest military generals, a man who would go down in Athenian folklore as one of the greatest ever Athenian commanders. However, barely 7 months after the start of their revolt, Leosthenes lay dead in the field outside the city of Lamia. The Athenians were sure to mourn Leosthenes' loss. He was a very charismatic and young general, and in the funeral oration that year, the annual funeral oration where a speaker in Athens gave a speech dedicated to those who had fallen, those Athenians who had fallen in the service of their country the previous year, he lavished praise and honour on Leosthenes, this martyr to the Athenian cause he was portrayed as. And that is how his memory has gone down in the sources down to present day. He was a man who died trying to throw off the Macedonian yoke from the city of Athens. So there you go. That was the interesting, fascinating life of Leosthenes. He was a major player in the immediate aftermath of Alexander the Great's death in Europe as Athens strove to regain lost liberty. I hope you've enjoyed this next episode of Ancient Generals Who's Who, and of course I will be doing more in the near future. But that was the life of Leosthenes.